Now, when you get the chance to chat to a man who's developed facial recognition for pigs, a special skin analyzer used in hospitals to help find cancer, and a camera that makes cows healthier by taking pictures of what comes out the other end and they leave behind. Yeah. Well, you can't not take up the offer. Lyndon Smith is a professor of artificial intelligence. He lives in Wedmore, and his latest project is to make science entertaining for we normal folk. During lockdown, he's written a new book. It's called Why You Can't Catch a Rocket to Mars, some personal reflections on science and society. And he's with us. Hello, Lyndon.
Well, hello, Simon. Thanks so much for having me on the programme.
Oh, no, it's an absolute pleasure. And what an interesting job you have. So, I mean, just explain to us, as a professor of artificial intelligence, what's your kind of daily work?
Well, really, it's doing research and also doing some teaching, I guess. So we try to bring the research into the teaching, to help the students. We're up at the UWE and the BRL, and we're doing research with computers and cameras to all sorts of different things, like you mentioned a minute ago. And then we're trying to do things that up to now have been difficult to do because they're a bit complicated and difficult, like trying to detect weeds in grass, And we're doing it using AI and special camera techniques, really.
And let's talk about AI, because for some of us it sounds a little bit scary. We're thinking these are the machines that are going to take over the world. They're going to be cleverer than humans. When did you first get into AI?
Well, it's when we got into vision. It was about 20 years ago. We set the lab up. It's called the Centre for Machine Vision up there, the French. And we set it up, and you can't really capture images without worrying about how you're going to process them. So we had to get into AI so that we can interpret all these images we got from the skin or from people's faces and all the things you mentioned, really.
And I mean, obviously, that the job that you were doing in the hospital, I mean, that is like a massive way forward in terms of diagnosing cancer, helping patients. I mean, that's a really good use of this kind of technology, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the skin analyzer, we've been developing it for about 18 years. And I really think it's got a lot of potential, because when someone goes and sees a doctor, the doctor's got no real tools to measure the size of a mole or what it looks like shape. It's a very, very subjective measure. So we were trying to develop a device that you could go to the doctors, you measure it, you come back in a couple of weeks, you measure it again, and any slight change could be detected, you see, and change is a bad indicator. So it's a sort of objective way of measuring whether a mole's suspicious, really. And we used it with about 1,000 patients up at the hospitals in Bristol and in London as well.
And that's an incredible thing to be part of a project like that. I mean, it must give you a fantastic sense of good fortune that you're involved in something like that.
Yeah, it's great. It's very, very rewarding. But on the other hand, it's very difficult, because if you have any things involved in the NHS, it's very difficult because of all the regulations you have, to get the thing out into the market. So it's very exciting, but it's always difficult to push it forward, if you know what I mean. What we need to do is move it beyond a research device into something we could use for diagnostics. Because up to now, we've been developing all the algorithms behind it, if you know what I mean.
But do you think that the situation that we've been involved in this last 12 months, where science has taken great leaps forward in very short spaces of time, the way that we interact with medical professionals has changed quite dramatically? Do you think that now the time is ripe for a project like yours to be, bigger, to get out there, more projects of a similar sort of thing, just because the world has sort of changed enough for us to go, actually, we can do things differently?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think, to be honest with you, we should have been doing things differently in the past, really, to some extent. Because, global warming, you don't want everybody driving around in a traffic jams all the time and all that kind of stuff. People could do a lot more from home. And the skin analyzer can be used for, like, remote teledermatology, where you get the 3D information from the skin and the 2D, and then the doctor can remotely look at it and move it around and change the lighting and everything. And this kind of thing could be, by having less traveling around, you're saving money and also helping the environment. So I think, yeah, we probably should have done more using Zoom, Teams, all that stuff in the past. But now we've sort of been forced into it. But I think it's a good thing to do a bit more of it anyway, really.
So, obviously, talking about that particular project, that you can see the sense in it, you can see why it would be something that you'd want to be involved in. Having a look at cows and what comes out the end to make them healthier, how does that work then?
Well, there's two bits of the cow. We got the House My Cow project, which is all being used by Arlo all around the country, about 50 different farms, and that looks at the cow condition. So we have a 3D camera that looks down on the cow as it goes off to milking, and it gets a condition, how much the bones are sticking out, and then it can tell whether that needs optimizing and tell the farmer to optimize it. The other thing I think you're talking about was something we had going on with Aberystwyth University, where we're looking at the cow pats to see what the textures of them and see what the cow condition is from that. That was also very interesting. So we got papers out on that one. But the How's My Cow was particularly good for me because we were doing it with a farm near Glastonbury. And I thought, wow, I finally got a project with someone nearby. You know what I mean? I've got 17 farms around here, and I talked to a farmer next to us, and I told him about it. He was a little bit skeptical. I said, this could save you some money, and he became a bit more interested then.
Funnily enough, if there's a saving, we're all keen. And I mean,
anything you can do to help the farmers is a good thing, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, absolutely. Well, anything we can do to help anybody is is a win, isn't it? And so now, are you a computer person, or are you how do you describe yourself at the heart? Do you write the algorithms for these clever AIs, or are you just someone who comes up with the idea and finds someone who can do it for you?
Well, you see, obviously we need people who can use the software, and the software takes a lot of installation and so on to get it installed. But the great beauty of it, right, actually, Simon, is that in AI we have something called convolutional neural networks. And that's a special type of machine learning technique, which I won't go into the details of. But once you've got loads of data, right? Suppose I go out into the field, I get loads of images of grass and quite a lot with weeds in the grass. Then I put that into the system. I say, this has got an image of weed, this is an image not, say 6,000 images. And then the system will automatically learn it. A bit like humans, okay? So it automatically learns patterns. So it isn't so difficult as it used to be in the past to try to work out algorithms. So it's all taken care of in the machine learning itself, you see. So that's why AI is so powerful, because when you've done that, it's just based on the actual nature of what a dockweed looks like, for example, rather than me trying to tell it what it looks like. So it's more reliable and more accurate as well, you see.
And so presumably something like that then, you find a machine that tells you this is a weed, this is grass, and then you can have a machine that then sprays the weeds or digs them up or picks them up and leaves the grass intact. Is that why you would invent something like that?
That's exactly it, yeah. You don't want to go spraying a broadleaf weed killer everywhere, apart from the fact that the government are going to stop you doing it soon. It's bad for the environment, costs a lot of money, and also kills the clover, you see. The clover is good for the cows, and it's also good for the soil. So if we can just say, there's a bit of weed here, just spray just on that bit of weed, this is what we're going to be doing in the future for sure. It's much more intelligent way to go about weed killing in a pasture, really.
But the kind of things that you're involved in, so AI, for starters, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, even rocketry, it sounds like I've stumbled into someone who's working in science fiction.
Well, I used to teach engineering up at the university, and somebody said to me in 2015, this is the day when Marty McFly is meant to come back on his hoverboard, okay? And I said, well, where's the hover? He'd be a bit disappointed, wouldn't he? Because we're actually going to travel on a diesel bus. So, so that sort of got me thinking, and that was 5 years ago, and I've been building this dream up, right? And I've been writing at the weekends and the evenings. And suddenly this lockdown, it might seem like a negative thing, but I tried to turn it into a positive, that this is something good that could come out of it, really. So I put the towel around the head, and I've been concentrating. I tried to make it amusing for people as well, and sort of relate to, popular culture and common characters that people know, like Back to the Future, Sherlock Holmes, Star Trek, and so on, to try and make it accessible. So hopefully people will find it enjoyable as well.
And do you think that there is, perhaps because of the way that school, certainly to someone of my generation, treated science, it was very serious. And, if we went into a lab, you've got to make sure that your health and safety, everything is all behind screens. And so there wasn't a huge amount of fun. It would be Johnny Ball on the telly doing experiments on Think of a Number that kind of made science fun.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think risk aversion is a big problem we have in society, because I try to talk about science in relation to society. Risk aversion is a big problem, and it's sort of killing off science, not only in schools, I think, but also in universities and in companies, because there's so much emphasis on it now that it's difficult to actually get the ethics done and everything else to go through and actually do it. So anything we could do to make it more accessible for people is fire their imaginations, I think would be really great. It's like I like talking about applications a lot, because that's what people can relate to. They can relate to what you can do with this technology and how exciting it is. And that's what I try to get across.
And your own involvement in science, how did you get into it in the very first place? Were you someone who was very small and sort of taken by having a chemistry set or something?
Well, my brother's an engineer, my father's an engineer, his father's an engineer, my wife's an engineer, her father's an engineer. Engineering kind of running the family, I guess. And so I was always interested in sort of mechanical things and physics and physical sciences. And I did a physics degree back in the dark ages, and then got into engineering, robotics degree. So I've always interested in what technology can do for us. And I think that, if you want to get into advanced technology, you need to get to something like physics a little bit. So I was always interested in that as well. And it sort of got out of control, I guess you could say. No, it's come on over the years. I've tried to think about what we can do to transform our lives with this technology, really. I think there's a lot that could be done that isn't being done. There's a lot of potential. That's why I like Elon Musk so much, because he's really a future thinker, thinking about what we can do with this advanced technology, electric cars, space travel. people need things to aspire to, I think, and to really think about and excite them. Like we used to have when we had the Concorde and we had the Apollo projects. That sort of faded away for the last 50 years. So I'm hoping it can really get going again.
And do you think we do need more mavericks? Is that what the world needs? Risk takers?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we need people who are not frightened to say what they think can dream, to dream and think about what we can do, and not worry about bean counting so much, which is a bit of a modern obsession, I think, and to think about how much we could really, really benefit by trying to exploit some of this advanced technology. I mean, look at smartphones, tremendously advanced technology, but hasn't been exploited that much really up until COVID. It wasn't really exploited much. So there's all sorts of ways we can exploit this advanced technology, especially with AI coming on so strongly, you see, because now we can do many jobs that people used to think were difficult or impossible years ago because they're just too difficult. Like you take a camera outside, the light changes, it's raining in the UK, the clouds gone behind. But if you've got AI, it's robust. It can do stuff even in the presence of all that, you see. So I'm thinking there's a vast array of different tasks we could do, which up to now haven't been done. We could automate a lot of dangerous, dirty jobs that people do at the moment, really. That would be the best thing to start with, I think.
But then if we do that, what about the people who do them? What jobs are they going to get?
Well, not necessarily everybody wants to do these very dirty, dangerous and difficult jobs, I mean, I'm sure it's not like you're putting people out of work, because by doing the very boring or dangerous jobs, you free up other opportunities, you improve the potential commercially for what you're doing usually, and create other jobs which are a little bit more interesting and probably more engaging for people and less dirty and dangerous. So I don't think we're talking about putting people out of work. I think we're talking about expanding the potential for industry and thereby creating a lot of jobs.
And in terms of artificial intelligence, as I said right at the very start, it sounds a bit scary, machines taking over the world. There's always got to be someone working the machines, isn't there, ultimately? So I can sleep soundly at night.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about robots taking the world over, because to be totally frank with you, I think a few people start talking about this because they want to sell a few books or something. I think we're hundreds and hundreds of years away from having machines that think. There's a difference between a machine being able to do a fairly difficult task and having it thinking like a human. And that's something which is very, very long way off. And to be honest with you, if a machine can't think, then it can't really plot in order to take the world over, can it?
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, that's it. I love the way that you said about people who want to sell books. You came on to tell us about your book, Why Can't You Catch a Rocket to Mars? Lyndon, with technology as it is, and the leaps forward that you've seen in your lifetime, what are we looking forward to? What do you speculate is going to be the next big things in terms of technology? Whether it's something you're working on or whether it's something that you hope someone somewhere is having a dream about.
Well, one of the what was it coming exciting everybody knows about at the moment, of course, electric cars. I think that's going to really help people a lot when that gets a bit more developed. I think robotics could come a long way, because up to now, industrial robots have been working in very structured environments in factories and very limited. But when you can work in a less structured environment, or even in the home to sort things out, I think we could see a massive burst in robotics and manufacturing. And then that will link to AI, of course. Nanotechnology, I talk about in the book. And I know over the last 20 years, I've been involved in talking to people who talk about the technology, but that's something that really would have massive potential if we can make certain breakthroughs in physics on the nanoscale. So nanotechnology has vast potential, I think. Rocketry, if we want to go to Mars, all the books about in one way is that, wouldn't it be nice to be able to get to Mars fairly easily rather than having to take a year or two and spending $1 trillion? And I think that things like, mass accelerators, the space elevator, I don't know if you've heard of this kind of stuff, but there's ways of getting things into orbit that are a lot cheaper once you built them than using a chemical rocket. So you could build an orbited space station, a very big one, and then you could send, using these techniques, and then you could send a man up in a rocket, and it'd be much easier to get to Mars from orbit, you see, than it would be from the ground. Right. So we could see travel to Mars being a lot cheaper, like 100 times cheaper, or thousands of times cheaper maybe, by doing that kind of thing. Or we could go to the moon and set up a base there and launch from there. That's not as fantastic as it sounds. Getting to the moon is not that difficult. They did it in the 60s, with 60s technology. So it could be a launch from there,
But you think definitely exploring the universe is sort of part of our future?
Well, I think so, yeah. Because another thing I go on in the book, talking about in the book, is that the various threats that humanity faces. I think probably climate change being the most serious of them. But if these are real threats that we can't do anything about, nobody really knows for sure whether we can do anything about it. But our ultimate survival of humanity will involve getting off the Earth. And like Ray Bradbury says, when we get to Mars, we will live forever. It's like once we can get away from the Earth and get into interstellar space, if we can. I talk about that, how we might get into interstellar space. Then all sorts of things are possible, and the future of humanity in the long run could be safeguarded. That's I think really.
Well, look, it's been really interesting talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time, Lyndon. Are you? I mean, you mentioned you wrote the book during the lockdown. Are you back doing real life stuff, or are you still doing a lot of remote stuff in terms of the university at the minute?
Well, yeah, I take people on to do projects, quite interesting little projects, medical, a lot of them nowadays. And I go in to make sure that they help them out and set them up the cameras and talk about the research, because I have to do that a bit. But a lot of it is being done remotely. And so tremendous amount remotely. And I think we can continue to do a lot remotely and still get some good work done. One thing I would say about the book, by the way, Simon, if you don't mind, is that I was going to make it free tomorrow as an ebook. That'll be the 15th of December, just in case anybody wants to have a look. You could download it on the 15th of December without having to pay for it on Amazon.
Okay, brilliant. Well, look, thank you for sharing that information with us, and really nice talking to you. Next time we talk, hopefully you'll be live in your house in Mars, I'm thinking, Lyndon. Well, I'll leave that with you. Lyndon Smith there, Professor of Artificial Intelligence. He lives in Wedmore. The book is called Why You Can't Catch a Rocket to Mars, and some personal reflections on science and society.